This morning, a couple weeks ago, I had asked Rob and Gavin if they would be willing to share a little bit about their experience hiking the Appalachian Trail. And they said, yeah, we'd love to do that. And so they're going to share, and just some of what their God moments were. How did God work and move as they were on the trail? And so I'm going to invite Gavin to come forward and share a little bit of his story first. And so would you just welcome him up here?
Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing today? All right, good. So some of you may or may not know this, but over the summer, my dad and I hiked 1,323.8 miles of the Appalachian Trail, which, let me tell you, is as tough as it seems. It is bad some of the time. Other times it's pretty good, but yeah. Anyways, as Joel was saying, we were approached by him and asked to give our like a little synopsis of how we saw God throughout our trip. I'm not going to do that anymore. There it goes. While I was on the trail, I've seen God in many ways before, but never as much as I have in the outdoors. I mean, I love to be outdoors, and it's one of my favorite places to be. But being out in the woods for that long gets a little bit old, just a little bit. But it was fun. I stuck through it for the most part. And while we were out there, we saw God in all different manners. I saw him in the wildlife that we saw. For example, we saw several deer. And one of those times, we saw a deer, and it was about as close as from me to that piano over there. Maybe the drums kit, but it was really close, and that was just beautiful. And I realized then that was God's creation, and it was good. Another example is when we saw that bear that we had seen. It was really cool to get that close to a bear without it aggravating us or bothering us or us aggravating it. So that was pretty cool. And it was also God's creation, and it was also a little scary, but good. We also saw him in the vegetation. For example, the flowers we saw were beautiful. We were walking in the woods early one morning, and there was, it had rained the night before, and there was frost everywhere, as you can see. It was beautiful, and Dad and I looked at each other and said, why did we get up this early? I saw God in that, because, he made all of that right there. He made me, I'm trying to figure out who that person in the background is. He made the leaves, he made the trees, and it was really, really beautiful. I also saw him in the views. Thing is, I'm afraid of heights. And that was a sheer cliff, but not it wasn't that far down, but you would definitely break your leg if you fell. So that was pretty nerve-wracking. But I looked around at what I thought was what felt like all of God's creation, and I was in awe. It was absolutely beautiful, and I know that I'm loved by that God that created all that beauty. And I also saw him in those cussed rocks. Those cussed rocks. One of my favorite examples is Dragon's Tooth. Now, Dragon's Tooth is pretty much a vertical face of rock with pretty much no rock handholds or grips to speak of. The only thing you had to keep you up some of the time was steel rebar, and that wasn't all that evenly spaced. That wasn't like a ladder, but it was. I like rock climbing, so it was fun for me, but I know Dad had a devil of a time getting down that, or at least I know he didn't have fun with it. And I look back on that time, and I smile because that was God, and it was amazing what He's done for us. Most of all, I saw Him in the people. One of my best friends on the trail, well, there were actually a lot if I was being honest, was Pringles. She was a graphic designer and had a lot of the same interests as I did. She listened to the Critical Role podcast with me, and she was a really good person, and God created her. I'd like to think to cheer me up sometimes because she always had a way to make me laugh no matter how down I was. We met people from all different walks of life and countries. We met a few Germans, we met some people from Finland, and we met a few British people, and we met, I think, two people from Isle of Man. So that was pretty cool. We also met a guy from Alaska and Canada, which I forgot to mention in the previous service. Anyways, it's incredible how much God has done for mankind, because He created man, and then He created ideas, and then He created woman. Not necessarily in that order, but He gave us everything we have here. He gave us the ideas to think of this stuff so that we could build it. And that's pretty incredible. Can I get an amen? Thank you. I've always wanted to do that. Sure. Woo! I'm on top of the world. And it was like, no matter how fast I walked or how far I walked, I could never get away from Him, and that was really comforting. If I had to pick one person in our trail family is like a family that you meet on the trail, like a bunch of group of people that hike together. It's a trail family, and you become close friends. If I had to pick one person from that trail family that helped me the most, it would definitely be my best friend, Angel. Well, my best friend on the trail, Angel. She was our trail mother. Now, I know that sounds like she has a lot of kids and she's old, but she's not. She doesn't have any kids, and she's 23. And so she would dance for anything. I mean, like a good chance at food, or a chance at good food, music, just because she was happy to wake me up in the morning, which, let me tell you, is really, really hard to get me up in the morning. I mean, I barely got up this morning, but I did, so I'm here. Anyways, we had these little communion cups that we did for some parts of the trail. We took one at Coal Mountain, which was pretty cool. We took it with Austin and Paul Sink, but sometimes our trail family didn't get along. Angel and Bullfrog would give me a hard time, and I'd give them a hard time, and it got a little out of hand, but whatever. Anyways, having a trail family is almost exactly the same as having a real family. I mean, it feels the same way. You are always there for each other, and you don't have sibling rivalries, which is really, really difficult to do in a family. But no matter which way you shape it, that bond will always be there. And I know that that is God's work, because why would He have put me with those people if He hadn't wanted me to be with those people? Anyways, that's all I've got. But I would like to welcome my dad, Rob, up here for the second part of this. And thank you.
Well, I've successfully ascended the stairs twice without tripping, so I'm going to take that as a positive sign. My goal is to get us to lunch before the Baptists, but I do have a few things I'd like to share with you about the trip. Obviously, I'm rather nervous, and as Gavin mentioned a few weeks ago, Joel had asked us if we would share some of our hiking experience and how we encountered God on the trail. And I'd really hoped that I would get that opportunity, so we were very pleased to say yes. On February 24th, Gavin and I set out from Springer Mountain, Georgia, with the 6-month goal of trying to hike 2,200 miles to the northern terminus of the Appalachian Trail at Mount Katahdin in Maine. Unfortunately, 5.5 months found us 3 weeks ago in Newton, New Jersey, trying to decide whether we should continue on or call it a summer and head home to our family and friends. We chose the latter with no regrets, but we hope to return to the trail over the next couple of summers to finish up our last 870 miles. Before I delve too deeply, I'd like to answer a few of the most commonly asked questions that we get right off the bat. Number one, about 8 to 10 miles a day at first, but we've worked into about 14 to 16 miles a day as we got stronger. Number two, between 30 and 35 pounds for me and 20 and 25 pounds for Gavin when we were fully resupplied with food and water. Number three, instant mashed potatoes, or nor pasta sides, with Parmesan cheese, a few tablespoons of olive oil for extra calories, and an individually wrapped Spam packet. Number four, right at 50 pounds and 30 for Gavin. And number five, in the woods like a bear. Jesting aside, one of my main goals for this trip was for Gavin and I to experience God in nature. There were so many incredible views that made achieving this goal a no-brainer. I will never forget reaching the top of Rocky Top. I had forgotten that it was on the trail. It afforded 360-degree views of the Smokies and the surrounding mountains. As you can see in the picture, it was still winter at the time, and there was still some snow covering the surrounding peaks. The weather was absolutely clear, and it seemed like we could see forever. On the same day, we summited Clingman's Dome, the highest point on the Appalachian Trail. The views were good, but the clouds had moved in, so they weren't incredible. But the trail getting to Clingman's was the most memorable hike that we completed along the trip. The trail passed through a spruce forest with what looked like Christmas trees everywhere. There was still some lingering snow around, and the ground, the fallen trees, and all the rocks were covered with beautiful green moss. Passing through this area, I remember stopping for 5 or 10 minutes waiting on Gavin to catch up with me, and I just teared up at the beauty of God's creation. Times such as these are what I called God moments, and we certainly had more than our fair share of them during our trip. I experienced plenty of God's creatures along the trail as well. As Gavin mentioned, we saw deer as close as from here to the music stand that would just sit there and stare at us. And it was awesome. I remember thinking, this is one of God's creations, and I'm blessed to be here and having such a close look at it. I also got a close look at 2 rattlesnakes and 4 copperheads, 1 bear, 2 porcupines, several squirrels, a fleet of chipmunks, and an uncountable number of mosquitoes and gnats. I appreciated the wildlife that we saw along the trail, and apparently they appreciated us also. In fact, about 30 minutes into our long rented car ride home, a deer in New Jersey liked us so much that he tried to jump into the back seat through the window and come home with us. I'm still trying to sort that out with Enterprise and Horace Mann. When people ask me about my favorite part of the trip, I tell them about the people that we met. Since having my interest in backpacking rekindled a few years ago on a church trip planned by Josh and Paul, I've probably read between 15 and 20 books, and I've watched hours upon hours of YouTube videos detailing countless people's journeys northward up the AT. In each of them, you read about the people that they met and how everyone pulls for everyone else, how everyone is on the same team. I have to tell you that nothing that I read prepared me for what I experienced on the trail. Here's just one example. One afternoon we had been hiking and Gavin beat us to a road crossing where we were planning to get off the trail for the evening and go into a hostel. He'd waited for us by the trailhead listening to his telephone. After settling in the hostel, my hiking partners and I decided that we would go to supper, and we left Gavin there at the hostel to YouTube for a while. That was one of his favorite things during the trip, was to get into a place where there was Wi-Fi. While we were at supper, Gavin called to let me know that he had left his charging brick for his telephone at the trailhead. I knew it was likely gone, so I told him to chalk it up to an experience and a lesson in being more responsible. I found later, though, that through the efforts of 3 different groups of people that we'd met that day, one who found the charger, another pair of folks who remembered where we were going to be staying, and a third who had remembered seeing Gavin with the charger, by the time we got back to the hostel, a phone call had been made, Gavin had been contacted, and arrangements were made for us to meet those folks the next day on the trail for the charger to be returned. There's a saying out there that the trail provides, but sometimes I'm not sure that the trail doesn't have quite a bit of help along the way. We made many lifelong friends along the trail. One of the first was Travis, whom Beth refers to as the Mennonite minister from Manitoba. We kept bumping into each other at shelters and at campsites, so we decided that we would hike together. Travis came on the trail to sort out some issues that he was having with depression. In that area, he and Gavin have plenty of common ground, and each supported the other for as long as we hiked together. On his blog, Travis wrote that if he hadn't met Gavin and me, he likely would have quit the trail very early on, but that our friendship kept him going. I hope Travis knows that the feeling is mutual. In our daily prayers, Gavin and I prayed that we would inspire and be inspired by others along the trail. It actually became our mantra, which helped us continue for as long as we did. It seemed that as we hiked up the trail, God would put just the right people in our paths at just the right time. Travis was one. 2 others were Leanne, who goes by the name Wednesday, and Sarah Jane, whom Gavin mentioned as Pringles. We met both of these ladies the first week we were out, but we weren't regular hiking partners. Instead, they just seemed to pop up on days when Gavin was going a little sideways and needed a boost or needed a mama or a grandmother figure to talk him off the bridge and help right his ship. Both became great friends to us, and both were highly complimentary of Gavin, his maturity, and his ability to carry on a conversation with an adult. Through their comments with me, I know that each of them was inspired by Gavin, and I know that he was inspired by them. Perhaps the folks who have become the best friends to us were our trail family, Brittany and Jeremiah, known in my blog as Angel and Bullfrog. We met at a shelter just outside of Hot Springs, North Carolina, when the 2 of them arrived one afternoon very late. Angel was fuming. It seemed that her previous trail family had misrepresented the number of miles they traveled in a day, how fast they walked, and the types of substances that they ingested on a regular basis. She was at the end of a 16-mile day and just having a conniption fit laced with 4-letter descriptions of just what she thought of the trail and was vowing to quit when the quiet voice of a 13-year-old came from the shelter behind her and said, "Do you need a hug?" After she got over the embarrassment of profanely spilling her guts in front of a youngster, we invited the 2 of them to hike with us. The next morning, they joined us in our morning prayer, and we set off together. With the exception of a couple of weeks along the trip, we prayed together every morning and hiked with them all the way to New Jersey, where we decided to call it a summer and come home. Angel and Gavin were so good for each other. She could talk to him like an older sister, and she had a gift for calming him down when he was having a tough go of it. She even took her turn at trying to wake Gavin, and he does not understate how difficult a task that is. Bullfrog was also an encourager to Gavin. He would take the time to play games with him or throw frisbee or just talk as an older brother would be. Both quickly became incredible friends to us for life, and I have no doubt that we all would have ended our journeys earlier than we had if we hadn't been hiking together. In addition to the people that we met on the trail, we had plenty of support from home. The weekend after Gavin's 14th birthday, Paul and Austin Sink came out to meet us. They set up trail magic at a road crossing with soup, drinks, snacks, and birthday cupcakes. They even had a birthday card set out for the other hikers who passed through to sign for Gavin. Later on, they met us in Virginia one weekend, and they hiked and camped with us. As Gavin mentioned, Angel's mom had been sending us little communion cups that looked to be about the size of a half and half creamer container with the juice on the bottom and the little wafer sealed on the top. We talked with Paul, and he agreed to officiate over communion for us, so as a trail family, we were able to partake of bread and wine together. That morning, standing in the saddle between 2 hills with perfect weather and views for miles was one of the biggest God moments the entire trip for us. In addition to Paul and Austin's visit, our church youth group visited us along with several of my close friends in Damascus to celebrate Gavin's birthday. We were even met by the Muscarelli crowd who stopped in to visit us and buy us dinner in Duncannon, Pennsylvania while they were on their way to visit family in Philadelphia. I will never forget the night that I was sitting outside a shelter just south of Roan Mountain, Tennessee, talking to Beth on the phone. I saw somebody walking down the trail coming towards the shelter with a dog, and I said, "You know, Beth, that dog looks like she has the same backpack as Joy." As they got closer, I remarked, "And that dog has the same leash, the same bungee, no-hands leash that Joy has." Closer still, I said, "And that looks like Jill." And it was. Jill had come up and parked at a road crossing about 4 miles from the shelter and had hiked in to bring Joy to visit Gavin. She also brought me a new pair of shoes, which had come in the mail just a few days after Beth and Griffin were able to come visit us, and she had a cooler bag filled up with drinks that we shared around the shelter. Gavin and I consider ourselves truly blessed to have such wonderful people as these in our lives, and we appreciate them more than they can possibly realize. We also appreciate all of you who left encouraging comments on our blog, on our YouTube channel, on Facebook. Your support kept us going, and even though we weren't able to respond to all of the comments, they were read and they were greatly appreciated. I've talked about the things that we saw and the people that we met, but I believe that the best God experience that I had was watching Gavin grow and mature along the trail. I'll never forget hiking behind him in those early days in Georgia. Every time we came to a water bar, so it's a log in the trail that serves to divert water off the trail so that there is less erosion, Gavin would stop and he would step over, and he would step over, and then he would step to that rock, and that rock, and that rock. It took all that I had to keep me from flipping my trekking pole over, choking up on it, and flailing away at the back of his head because I just wanted him to get on with it. Okay? Before long, though, he did find his stride, and he was hiking just as quickly and as confidently as any hiker that was on the trail. In the first few weeks, I hiked behind him because he was afraid that I would walk off and leave him if I were in front, and I would have because my legs are a bit longer. As his confidence increased, though, I would walk ahead, but I would stop every 10 to 15 minutes to wait for him. Once I saw that he was okay, I'd move on. As time passed, I would stop less often, allowing the gap between us to grow larger. Finally, his confidence and his ability allowed him to walk in front. Often, I would stick myself behind Angel and Bullfrog so that we could talk and I wouldn't leave them behind with my long legs. Gavin would go off in front, often putting more than a mile between us. He would then stop and wait for us to catch up. I lost count of how many hikers passed Angel, Bullfrog, and me going in the opposite direction who would ask which of us belonged to that young man that they just met up the trail. It made me so proud to hear them compliment his courtesy, his friendliness, and his hiking ability. And I never got tired of watching their jaws drop when I would say, "We started in Georgia in February." I'm so proud of Gavin and the growth that he has made along our journey, and I look forward to seeing him continue to grow as a person and as a hiker. In preparing for speaking here today, I asked Beth to suggest some scriptures. One verse that she chose was Genesis 21:20. "And God was with the boy as he grew up in the wilderness. He became a skillful archer." Though I'm not sure of Gavin's skills with a bow, I know that God was with him and he was with me throughout our entire journey. In fact, it is evident to me that God had a hand in our entire trip from the very beginning. In May, a year ago, after learning that our principal was going to be leaving us, I went straight home and started looking at the possibility of retirement. As Beth and I prayed about it, several things in our life lined up just so as to make it a possibility, and I decided to go ahead. I remember standing in our assistant principal's office talking with him about the decision, and Beth said offhandedly, "You know, you can't just go off traipsing through the woods for 6 months and leave me at home with both the boys." And I said, "I know, something will work out, and I'll get there someday." Well, the next day, Jay found her in her classroom, and he said, "Beth, you know, I prayed about this last night, and I think I have the answer. It came to me. Rob takes Gavin out of school. He homeschools him this year, and they go on the trail together." And that's how it worked out. On a daily basis, I have thanked God for both the ability and for the opportunity for us to go on this trip together. We could not have done it without his help, and also without the support of my wonderful wife and my younger son, Griffin. It's quite an ordeal to send your husband, your dad, your son, or your brother away on a 6-month journey into the woods. Through it all, they've supported us, and I pray thanks every day for the blessings that you both are in my life. I love you both dearly, and Gavin, I love you, and I'm proud of you and all that you have accomplished. And thank you guys for having us here today.